suddenly one is seeing that what was happening to the neta in cinema, in media, in popular conversations and discussions as the ultimate villain and responsible for everything that's going wrong, some of the times very unfairly, is beginning to creep up about journalists. So the whole, this constant kind of demonization or everybody across age groups tends to, end all discussions with the media. So I thought it's a great time to look at some issues which affect the profession, affect the way, people view it, and especially in front of people like you who are going to join it and who are going to be the lifeblood of the trade. It's a good opportunity for all of us, I think, to discuss what actually gives reason for this, for blame that is very justified, and for some of it which may be more political, more, and trying to do something which may actually harm Indian democracy. So shall we kick off, Paranjoy? Would you like to, you've had your fair bits of run-ins with the media. You've never hesitated to tackle difficult issues and argue your case and do it very diligently. So tell us a bit about why you think blame it on the media is valid sometimes.
Okay. The first thing I just like to sort of take one step back and say there is no one Indian media. I mean, that's a misnomer to say that somehow the media, newspapers, magazines, books, radio stations, television channels can somehow be all clubbed together into one almost homogeneous kind of whole. It's not true. I mean, at the last count, the Registrar of Newspapers of India had something like about 100,000 publications registered. We were just talking about radio stations. You have one of the world's biggest radio organizations called All India Radio or Akashvani, but you have over 250 FM radio stations, over 150 community radio stations. But yet, curiously, India is arguably the only large democracy, or perhaps the only democracy of its kind in the world, where news and current affairs on radio is still a monopoly of the government. Then when you look at television, I mean, there's been a dramatic transformation in television. Till the early 90s, there was one broadcaster. Today, we are perhaps the only country in the world where the Information and Broadcasting Ministry has given permission to uplink and downlink. Something like 900 such licenses have been issued, out of which something like 300 odd television channels claim they are news and current affairs channels. And of course, one doesn't know how many websites there are of any significance which is putting out what is supposed to be news and current affairs. So you have a multiplicity of media organizations. At the same time, these multiple media organizations do not reflect the diversity, the heterogeneity of a country like India. And I'll just give you one example. It sounds impressive that we have so many newspapers, so many magazines. Take the National Capital Region of Delhi alone. This is the only urban area in the world which brings out something like 16 English daily newspapers. Now, there's no other country, or no other part of the world with so many English daily newspapers. But when you look at the top 2 newspapers, they account for over 3/4 of the total circulation of all English newspapers. So at one level you can say, oh, there are so many English newspapers, but there are actually 2 which dominate the market. Why am I saying all these things? Because the media, newspapers, magazines, books, radio stations, television channels are different from other products or services even. These offerings, don't follow the rules of the marketplace, the laws of capitalism as many other products and services do. So the intensification of competition often results in a lowering of standards because everybody wants to grab those eyeballs, get those readers, so it's often a race to the bottom. So who produces out the most amount of trash? Now, what has happened is in the process, the credibility of a lot of what is put out in the media has taken a huge beating. Let me again take a step back and say corruption in the media or trivialization of information or sensationalization of information or exaggeration of fact is nothing new, nor is it unique to India. It's been there for a long, long time. So why are we suddenly talking about this today? It's because we see that the intensification of competition has resulted in a lot of trash being put out. So, everybody not only wants to be first with the news, everybody wants to shout the loudest. So you today, and we were just discussing this over lunch, today you have a choice of do you want to watch your favorite anchor, my old friend Arnab Goswami, telling you what the nation wants to know? And you think, yes, I want to know what the nation wants to know. And there are 8 people in these small boxes, and all of them are speaking simultaneously, so you don't know what anybody is saying at any point of time. All you know, they're shouting and screaming at each other. And then you wonder, is this more entertaining than the Saas Bahu serials? And should you press a button and sort of check out, what would you prefer? The mother-in-law, sort of inflicting sort of psychological torture on the daughter-in-law. So this is the kind of level to which a lot of what goes on in the name of news has actually degenerated. So it's not surprising that people should be of the view that a lot of what is put out in the media is just trash. And if there's corruption in Indian society, this gets reflected in the media. I have acquired a considerable amount of notoriety for all the wrong reasons, all the right reasons, if you like. Some years ago, I was a member of the Press Council of India, and we put together a report, me and a colleague of mine. It was called Paid News: How Corruption in the Indian Media Undermines Democracy. This report was sought to be suppressed unsuccessfully. It's a public document. If you, it's available, and it names names. Some of the biggest names in the media business are named there, and there is evidence provided, or circumstantial evidence provided, of how what is shown as news is actually advertising. So you're not only just fooling your reader, your viewer, your listener, you're also violating the laws of the land. Because in the run-up to the elections, if you are a candidate of standing for elections and you don't disclose what you're spending, you're violating the laws. And if you are also receiving money illegally, that too is a violation of the laws of the land. So what you're seeing is the kind of corruption that exists in society is also existing in the media. Having said this, one should not say that everybody is the same. There are dogs and there are dogs, there are journalists and there are journalists. And this is my favorite analogy. And I'll end with that so that Vipul can take over.
Yes.
Journalists are often described as a watchdog, watchdogs of society, right? There are watchdogs and watchdogs. At home we have a watchdog that can only bark but cannot bite. But at least it does its job quite well, because the thief or the burglar who's coming doesn't know that the dog cannot bite but can only bark. But that's good. And you have those kinds of dogs. But you have also what are called lap dogs, and those lap dogs are very quiet, they wag their tail, especially if the lap belongs to a very important person. It could be a politician, it could be a corporate captain, it could be an important government officer. And there are also what are called intelligent dogs and guide dogs. You've heard about the Saint Bernards who rescue people who are caught in a blizzard. I mean, there could be an intelligent guide dog that could help a visually challenged person cross the road. You could have a dog that could sniff out drugs or explosive substances from a pile of luggage. So just as there are dogs and there are dogs, there are journalists and there are journalists. So you have to ask yourself as you come out of this institute what kind of a dog you want to become. and remember that, in chapter 1 you were told, dog bites man, no news. Man bites dog, news. Yeah. No, there's a change in that. If dog bites Narendra Modi, it will become news. I can assure you that. So it all depends on who the dog bites.
I think that's a brilliant, absolutely wonderful analogy. And you must strive to be like pretty good dogs. And there's also this other dog in The Hound of the Baskervilles, which does not bark. And so they figure that the murderer has to be somebody who's known to the dog, because the dog kept quiet. So remember that keeping quiet also, as journalistic dogs, there's a price. So be a good dog. So Vipul, you've been on both sides of this sort of dog kennel. You've been inside the kennel, and now you're with Common Cause, where you talk about other news and causes and issues that you think are worthwhile. You almost kind of, lobby is a bad word, but you push for certain kinds of news to be made more prominent. What is your sort of, if you could just do an opening thing about your sense of what is the kind of success rate, what are the questions that come back to you when you try and push for, say, poverty or a drought story at a time when everybody's talking about a murder case in Bombay?
See, we have been working, once again, let me first thank everybody, Parvez and Ashokji and everybody who's invited us. You see, we have been looking at the media coverage of the marginalized, okay? and among them, very specifically on issues of rural India, issues of poverty, issues that affect rural India. Okay, and one of the recent researches which we had done, which is not a very deep kind of, not a huge research, but it still talked about what is covered and how the coverage of top 3 Hindi newspapers and top 3 English newspapers of India of the rural distress of India. Okay, how the reality about rural India is constructed in the media. And we found that in these 3 top papers, Times of India, Hindustan Times and Indian and the Hindu, and top 3 Hindi papers, Dainik Jagran, Dainik Bhaskar and Amar Ujala. So we took newspapers of 1 year, randomized them. There are ways you would know. And we literally plowed through the entire newspaper of that day to look at how any news about rural India has been covered. And we found that, in short, in 6 top newspapers in the country, they devoted about 2% space for rural India. And that 2% was the most interesting part, was that once you started looking at what was that 2% devoted for, then you realize that out of this 2%, the highest category, which was about 36% of the 2%, was devoted to issues of violence, issues of disaster, issues of legal issues, domestic violence, Naxalite violence, all kinds of violence related issues. The second category of this 2% was 28% of the 2%, which was given to the issues of rural business. Okay, fertilizer, transportation, seeds, mandi ke issues, issues of procurement, issues of things like that. So basically issues which are related to the business of farming or the rural India seen as a market. That is the second category under this 2%. And the last category, since we were also looking for about 35 different issues covered under extreme rural poverty, farmer suicides, mother's malnutrition, child malnutrition, issues of education, issues of abuse, issues of child labor, like there were 35 different categories, and we were hoping that we'll find something and we'll check the box here, but you do not find anything there. And this was 15% of the 2%. So if you wanted to see what is the coverage of 70% of India in India's top newspapers, you would find that it's about 0.4%. Okay. Now, looking at this coverage, we also started finding out ways and talking to editors, and not really doing participant observation, but speaking to people who construct this news. And some of them were very good human beings. And we tried to find out, why don't you cover these issues? So one of the reasons that came out was that, look, the readers, the advertisers and the journalists who work for urban English and even bigger Hindi newspapers are urban people. They are not rural folks, so they are more interested in issues of urban India. So rural India takes a back seat. And then they said, issues of malnutrition and issues of farmer suicide are distressing issues, and people are not interested in those issues. I mean, whoever decided, for whatever reason, I also have worked as editor in one of the editions which I was editing. We had a long discussion with one of the managers who was constantly saying that do not cover drought in Rajasthan, because it is depressing and it does not get you anything. And I was actually, in one of the meetings I went with, the CEO was present, and I was actually able to demonstrate to them that when the drought happens in the city or in the villages around, it literally sucks the light out of the urban market. When there is a drought in your university is beautifully located in the middle of villages, and you would see that if there is drought here, if people do not have enough to eat, probably nobody is going to go and get a daughter married this year. They'll postpone it for next year or something like that. So all the expenditure of rural India is postponed. So I was telling them, literally pleading with them that, look, do not stop this, because your biggest, when purchasing power comes in the hands of the rural poor, they go to the market and they're the first people to buy a SIM card and then a handset. And you know, so the demand for goods and services is actually created by the rural folks. So to say that their issues are inconsequential is absolutely wrong thinking,
Yeah.
even from the point of view of business and from the point of view of news. I mean, this is what I would
Yeah,
put
no,
out
that's
in
an
the
interesting
beginning.
thing that, I mean, Vipul has formulated an argument in the parameters of how maybe the marketing people put it to you. So that's an intelligent way of trying to convince the marketing editor, as it were, that you need to be able to make your case and there's a connect between what the urban reader or a viewer wants or not. Paranjay, I just want to draw you into this whole thing that's always thrown at us, particularly when television channels are questioned about what makes them decide what kind of coverage and why it is of a particular nature. Eyeballs is always thrown at you, and in terms of survival, which brings us to a point which you referred to briefly when you were speaking, that it's not like any other product. But do you see increasingly a lot of bigger industrial houses who are running newspapers see it as precisely that? So it has become a product. So where does this kind of pillar of democracy argument stand with it becoming like soap or shampoo, where, you know, it's a made to order thing? This is what the person I'm selling to wants, so I put in those elements in that product.
Okay. Seema, this is a complicated question, and I take a little time and sort of move back and forth to try and explain what I want to say. Information, you could argue, is like a public good, like the air we breathe, or the water, or the land, or any other public good. Yet it's not really a public good. You know, you have a signboard which says, this is a university, or this is a bus stop. That's information. But that information is also provided to you, it's packaged, it's beautifully gift wrapped and sold to you. All right. Now, that too is information. Yet, as we discussed, it's not a bag of potato chips that you eat. It's not food for your stomach. It's also food for your thought. So at one level, it's a product. At another level, it's a service. At another level, it is food for your thought. It changes your values. It's not just shapes the way you look, the way you speak, and what you wear. It influences the way you think. Your attitudes, your values, your ideologies, your principles, all of that get influenced. So that's the first point I thought I should flag. Secondly, what's happening is across the world and also in India, the media is going through a huge churn. And let me explain why. What is today the difference between what was earlier called broadcasting and today called telecommunications? There's no difference. So you missed out today on What the Nation Wants to Know by Arnab Goswami at 9 o'clock, but you can catch it at 2 o'clock in the morning on YouTube. You know, so what's our notion of prime time? You know, the way television changed our biological clock. Again, things have been changing very fast. See what's happening across the world. 2 or 3 things have happened. The first thing is the internet. Very few of us could have imagined that the internet would have such a huge influence on human society even 15 years ago. The internet is barely 25 years old, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it's had a huge impact on the lives of human beings, and even those who don't are using the internet. Maybe more than half the population of the planet, or 60% of the population of the planet is still not using the internet, but the internet is having an influence on the way they live. That's point one. Now, the internet is such that everybody wants everything free. You want everything free to read, to view, to listen to. At the same time, you know there's a lot of trash on that internet. The biggest business on the internet is pornography. Yeah, but at the same time, you can't, you know, do without the net. I mean, you people are probably privileged and you have always on connectivity, and if somebody says you can't use the internet for 48 hours, it's almost like an alcoholic being told you can't drink, or a cocaine addict saying you're getting withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
You know, I have to check my message, I have to check my mail, my SMS, but WhatsApp. You know, WhatsApp, my God, I mean, 1 billion people are using WhatsApp. I mean, and then look at what's happening here, say in India alone. You have a country of 1.25 billion people. You have about 1 billion SIMs, SIM. Do you know what SIM means? Subscriber Identity Module. Now, you have about 750 odd handsets. Out of which these 750 million odd, roughly about 250 million are supposed to be so-called smartphones. Chalak, Chalaman, Durbash, Yantra. You know, it's all there in your hand, and you know, it's the whole world is in your hand kind of thing. Now, wait. You think, that at one level, every journalist today has the means to become, every citizen can be a journalist, but not every citizen can actually become a journalist. You may have the power to take a picture, you may have the power to record what somebody is saying, but to be a journalist is to be much more. To not just recount facts, but to tell a story and to engage people's attention, to be able to communicate effectively, to bridge the gap between those who know and those who don't. Okay, I'll take one more step back and say, what's happened over the last 10 years in particular? We've had a recession across large parts of the world, the Great Recession. In India, we don't like the R word, so we say slow down. In China, we say slow down. But what has happened is, the economies of most countries across the world have been adversely impacted in the recent past. Now, what happens when people go through difficult times? You tend to cut back on expenditure. Now, what happens when you cut back on expenditure? What are the kinds of expenditures that people have cut back on? One of them is on advertising and marketing services. And this has directly impacted the revenue models of traditional media organizations. Now, this has paved the way for the large corporate bodies to also acquire control of the media. And I'll give you two examples to make a point. Say the richest man in India, Mr. Mukesh Ambani. He heads, he's the head of a media organization. He's also heading a telecom organization that from this year onwards is going to provide you fourth generation
4G
services. So that same telecom service provider is also giving you the content. Say the other one, Living Media India Limited, the TV Today group. It was promoted by the Puri family, but its biggest shareholder today is the group of companies headed by Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla. Now, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla is also the head of the third largest mobile telecom service providing company, which is Idea Cellular. So we are seeing these different kinds of convergence. The owners of telecom and the owners of the media are converging into one. At the same time, because the traditional media organizations, their revenue models, their ability to generate funds has got disrupted, we are also seeing a sort of the large corporates, those with deep pockets, are also controlling the media. And one last point I wanted to make. Now, this has had an impact on what you see and what you hear and what you watch. And it's not only what Vipul said earlier, that a farmer committing suicide is not considered newsworthy, but the wardrobe malfunction of a model on a ramp is considered very, very newsworthy. That's only one part of the story. Who is paying for news gathering today? Who is paying for the investigative reports? If somebody has to go meet a large number of people, travel to different places to find out what is happening, and then write to you and provide you an information with pictures, with words, all of it costs money. So, at one point of time, the media organizations, which call themselves a part of the fourth estate, which are supposed to be, the institution which would hold accountable those who are in positions of power and authority. It would be a sort of the institution that would be the providing checks and balances in a democracy. You are finding that their funds are getting squeezed in terms of gathering information and providing information. So all of this has contributed to the kinds of issues that have been thrown up, where people put out that which is cheapest to put out and that which titillates you, but it's often not very deep. It's very, very shallow. It's very, very trivial. And then you can blame the media. But this is why the media is putting out
what it is.
What it is putting out. Yes.
So the role of media as being this firm kind of independent body, this very amorphous kind of a creature, which has all kinds of medias, as you very rightly put out, is quite threatened in this new world. And I want to just pick up from this very important point that Paranjay made about new technology and how that's impacting media. There is now a kind of feeling that if I just go somewhere and I blog it, that's almost equivalent to a top cat journalist who writes this copy, which is then edited and out. And I feel that what's the difference between my going on, blogging it, and a piece of journalism? So would you just help us figure what's the difference between blogging something and journalistically reporting something?
Do you realize how beautifully this question has been asked? Now here is somebody who has views. Probably I could be sitting here and she could be sitting here and making sense of this.
And my job here is to provoke the two of you to unleash this kind of samundar of ideas
and that is why in the end
controversies.
I'll say that we must hear her also on this. After that, but let me
scary me.
My
Now
point.
that's a piece of journalism.
No.
Now that's a very the nation wants to know kind of point. Yeah. Well done, Vipul.
No. See, what Paranjay said about social media and everything, I mean, you see, when I left active journalism quite some time ago, and but while I was there, in my newspaper, I was given a very interesting job to handle. The Hindustan Times at that time was going through a complete change in which you wanted to become a multimedia company from a media company. First, from a newspaper company, you became a media company, and from media company, you become a multimedia company, and you literally blast the newsroom completely. And you start doing your
Piece it up
blogs
again.
and all those things that you mentioned completely differently. And there's a word for it. The word for it is platform agnostic journalism. So what you do is, when you come into a newspaper office, you go out. Perhaps you don't come to the office. You go to you get the call that this is your beat, or you go to your beat, university or crime or wherever, and immediately when you see something, first you capture it on your phone. There are no guesses here, and there are no ifs and buts. First, take your pictures, and then you do the first kind of filing of story, which is about 80 words or 60 words. No marks for guessing. This is for Twitter. Okay, the newspaper has a Twitter handle, and the newspaper wants their Twitter handle
break it first.
to break it first. And then you go immediately after that. The company has a contract with a mobile phone company, and they want to put out a scroll saying that the breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. So you as a reporter, it's your duty to put out, after giving those great 80 words, give about 140 words or 200 words for the scroll, and nobody is looking at your prose. Okay, nobody is checking your English. You just send
facts.
it out.
There is no second of the facts, which is,
My God, that's scary. But yes, I mean, facts. They are assuming that you've been taught well by Mr. Parvez Alam and Mr. Ashok Ogra to do a good job there. But yes, you do. Then second is for the mobile phone scroll. Third one is for the internet site. After all, there is an internet editor who's sitting there and who's saying, what happened to the bloody story? I can't write, 80 words can't become a story. We need, give me one paragraph, we'll invent the rest. So you write for that, and then you come back to the office, and then you do first a blog, and then your newspaper story. I mean, she works for, she's fortunately by now editor. So I mean, reporters have to do more work. But you put together. So this is all this is like platform agnostic journalism. And if you are a multimedia company, you also presumably have a radio station, if not a bouquet of radio stations, a clutch of radio stations. You have many television studios. So you also file in between for radio and for television. So this is how the architecture of a multimedia company works. Now let me take you a little deeper into this. I won't go too deep. Now, what is going on in the society in which we are living? We are living in a mediated society, and a mediated society is the one where we do not go to the reality, but reality comes to us. It visits us every evening through our television channels, and we watch the realities. Nobody has to go anywhere. So one of the repercussions of reality coming to us is that we are all consumers of second-hand politics. We don't consume first-hand politics.
Second-hand is often third-rate politics. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you don't go to politics. You don't become a member of a political party. Never. You don't go for political rally of Lalu Prasad Yadav or Mayawati or even Narendra Modi. Some people went, but so
Yeah.
you don't actually consume politics as it used to be consumed directly. First-hand politics. You consume your second-hand politics through your television, and there comes the beautiful game that Paranjay talked about, the lobbying. Now we see that because this medium is so beautiful and we are living in mediated society, the reality can be digitally enhanced. And the reverse of it, reality can also be digitally distorted. So then there are multiple traits. There are image makeovers, there are impression managers, there are people who do the steering of public opinion for you for a bigger price. There are people who are spin doctors who convert night into day, who can suddenly tell you close your eyes, suddenly it's night, and they tell you it's 12 o'clock at night, and everybody will believe except fools that it's at.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one brief
Yeah,
point
I have a
to
question.
what Vipul said, just to add to it. So the competition is such that it tells you you have to act with speed and also with accuracy. But what are you providing with speed? You are often, more often than not, catering to what we say the lowest common denominator. So the media is constantly insulting your intelligence. So you said Amitabh Bachchan has a headache, live breaking news, exclusive. And you said, oh my God, Amitabh Bachchan has a headache. How important is it? And then things get worse. Ghost sighted over Taj Mahal. 2 snakes getting married. So
These are real headlines, by the way. Snakes getting married is a real headline.
You have trivialized it to such an extent that you end up putting utter trash. Yes.
No, utter trash is great, but I mean, I just want to kind of the very important point Vipul raised about important political debates, issues, which is the business of media, what once used to be called the press, it becomes reduced to a very important part of a huge PR machinery, which has money, which has power, often has both. Now, in the previous elections, the big election just gone by in 2014, you had media houses, television, perhaps even print did it in some form or shape, running rallies, rally shots without stating clearly what the source of that was. I guess there is nothing wrong to say that Samajwadi Party or the BJP or BSP is providing us with these shots. But just by that little line not running there, you for months could just spin a completely different story. So do you think we need something more serious than introspection and debates to fix this very important thing? Because this media management business goes even beyond corporate houses. It can actually shape the politics that governs you. So,
you know, I not only agree with you entirely, I'll give you an example to illustrate this point. I think this is akin to what in America they call native advertising. It's really advertising masquerading as news. So if you think that's unethical, that okay, even if you put a huge one big page of a newspaper and at the bottom with very small letters you have 4 words ADVT, you need a kind of microscope to read it, it's like 6-point font or something, but at least they're telling you it's an advertisement. But you see the point that she was making, you don't know. So somebody is providing you the feed, you're not saying, you're not sourcing, you know, a good journalist was supposed to say, according to so and so, according to this source, or I saw this, or I spoke to so and so, whether on the record or off the record. You're not sourcing your information. You're getting that information and you're getting it free. It's being provided to you. So it looks very nice. It's been well filmed, well photographed. Even if the Maidan is not full, they're focused only on one part of the audience. So you think there are lots of people, there may not be that many people. So as Vipul also pointed out, those images and that information is being manipulated because somebody is paying for it, or it is in somebody's political interest to put out that information. Now, as a journalist, as a media person, you're not only supposed to be curious, you're supposed to be questioning. Now, that is unfortunately not happening. So public relations and advertising is masquerading as journalism. And that has, in my opinion, very dangerous consequences, not only for the future of democracy, or that the fact that the journalism or the media is supposed to strengthen democracy, strengthen institutions responsible for upholding democracy, but you become part of different kinds of rackets. It could be rackets run
organized. There are huge companies. I mean, the size of those companies is 200 crores, 500 crores. So their job is to actually put you on the wrong lines. You know, they are doing the thinking for you. They are trolling the social media in such a way that whatever no matter what you open on what handset or what device, you will probably run into them sometime or the other, because they are paying young students in small towns to just do the keyword flooding. You know, they do the lynching lynch mobs they organize on social media,
media.
where if you have views against the god or the big politician, then there are lynch mobs. They are looking for you. They are trolling you. They are writing. So much so that there are. I mean, there's no marks for guessing that there are the extremist Hindu organizations which are actually doing this day in and day out, and it's very and what kind of victims they have. Even Arun Shourie, who's not only a registered member but a former minister, just because he does not agree with the present dispensation,
His son was told.
his son, who's a autistic child or a person, they were like thousands of messages put out abusing him, his mother, and everybody. So we see that this place can also be hijacked. So what people do for a price the image management. Now look at the positive side. This is the distortion. Look at the image management. Very often it happens that a politician talks like this. You can close your eyes and imagine. There are some very important politicians in India who used to talk like this about 15 years ago, not today. So like a fast bowler's action is studied by video, or if you are a decent batsman, you'll study it on video 20 times to see how he does it. So in the same way, image managers look at your video and show it to you and say, sir, you are doing too much of finger pointing. Please stop doing this. So, and he's like in his 80s. All his life he's done this. So how can you change
So
it?
the Bhangra move is taken away.
How can you change it today?
Yeah.
So the image managers, they get seriously a lot of money. They are very clever people. So he said, why don't you convert it into this? It looks like global, as if you're referring. So that was easy, and the politicians started doing this. So you actually see there are image managers lurking around everywhere, and they do things for you. And then what it comes to you when the news comes to you. The other thing, all three of us have worked for television for varying. I mean, Seema much more than me, and Paranjay much more than Seema. So when you look at a television camera, this is your camera. You're told your camera is camera number 2, no doubt about it. And if you don't look into your camera like that, and you see 1 degree this way or 2 degrees that way, you come across as a shifty-eyed person. You come across as less believable than somebody who looks straight into the camera and talks like America needs you.
So now I've learned where a lot of people looking into cameras are getting it from.
So, if you get a politician who's a buffoon, who comes from the village, who doesn't know कि मैं 1.5 degree इधर देखूं या 2 degrees that side, and he makes a fool of himself because the reader, the viewer says that this guy is not believable. Somehow I don't believe him. My mother says, my wife says, I don't believe him somehow. How would you believe him? He's not done a day's training looking into his camera. And somebody who's like gone to St. Stephen's College and who's like, who's a past master.
I'll let that pass. We'll let that pass.
Somebody who's gone to any wherever.
We'll let that pass.
Let that pass. He comes across as a very believable, and इसकी बात मुझे समझ में आती है.
सबसे ज़्यादा बड़ा भला तो St. Stephen's वालों को.
So this is how, when the reality can be enhanced and reality can be distorted, just watch out. This is all second-hand
Fine.
politics.
Okay, I just want to
add one point to him. This whole business of ratings. Can I take a few minutes?
please, yes, briefly.
Very briefly.
Yeah.
This is a huge fraud displayed on all of us and you.
And they go to court on this also. Tell
Yes,
them
yes,
about
yes,
how it's been actually proven fraud.
No,
so it's not.
NDTV went to court. It's a separate matter that the
yeah.
New York judge said no. You can go back to
yes,
India and
yes.
check it. I'll just give you a set of facts. There are at least about 150 million households in India with television sets. There are at least 150 million. Nobody knows the exact number, but I'm giving you rough ideas. Now, how do they determine which particular program is being watched and for how long? You have less than 20,000 what are called people meters. These are little gadgets that are put at the back of the television set. Now, who decides where it is put? It's a big question. There's a long story, but even in the 600,000 villages in this country, where there's no electricity, people watch television with power drawn from batteries of tractors and things. But these people meters are not there. Until not very long ago, there was not a single people meter in entire states.
Yeah.
Like Jammu and
Eastern.
Kashmir, like Bihar, like the 8 states of northeastern India. Now what happens is, these people meters or so-called people meters are seeded in such a manner that they cater to certain households, certain people who belong to certain social and economic categories. So what's happening in the media is you're no longer providing information or news to the citizen. You are trying to reach advertisers or sponsors closer to potential consumers. So what happens is these ratings which come out, they tend to exacerbate this trend and determine what kind of stuff, what's the content you see on television, and also what you read on the website and what you read on the newspapers. Because you're not a citizen for the publisher or the broadcaster. You are a potential buyer or a consumer. So it has an influence, a profound influence, I dare say, on what you get to watch and what you get to read and what you get to hear. Because the whole rating system is inadequate, flawed and manipulated and corrupt. It's easily, I mean, there are a number of issues on this. We could have perhaps a longer discussion at some point of time. But there have been examples of how we see widespread manipulation and corruption in order to skew the rating system because there are big bucks behind it.
Okay, so now after a very exhaustive and I think a fairly interesting this side of media, which has all this potential to distort, there are examples of that which we've confronted squarely. I want to flip it all around actually, because behind this whole thing of blame it on the media crooks, you know, mainstream media needs to be trashed, there is this other kind of politics that forgets that, you know, but for that one intrepid reporter, somebody who pulls out stories, publishes them, that actually so much of truth is revealed. So before the RTI happened, your journalists or your honest journalists or good media, mainstream media very often, reveals issues, organizes debates, and actually pulls at one thread which, you know, the whole rug gets undone, whether it is corruption, whether it is the coal scandal, whether it is 2G, whether it was even Bofors, which was actually a very difficult, a dense thing to understand. But surely there were some journalists there doing their maths, making it intelligent, making it intelligible for people to understand that media is doing their job. So do you think that there are forces there which want to use all these, clearly these terrible things, that the ills that plague the system, to just pull down the entire business of independent media, without which actually India can't remain a democracy for too long? And then you'll have the same kind of 1975 argument that they're all anti-national, you know, put them behind bars.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is very well said. It's very important to actually come to this point because we are looking at the glass half empty or half full. The fact is that, like democracy, you know, see in Indian democracy what is working. I mean, nothing is working. Absolutely everything is breaking down. Every road is broken down. Every system is compromised. Everybody who's supposed to do a job is not doing his job. But at the same time, can we dispense with democracy? There's no question, because this is the best system we've got. And until we have something better, please leave me with my democracy. I'm very happy. In the same way, this media that we have is like busting at the seams. There are loads of problems with it, but this is better than, and when you compare this media with a media in a country where free expression is not there, then you realize what we've got. We've got a damn good media, by the way. And as Seema said, a lot of things, that little rug somebody has pulled, that's enough. Because what happens in a democracy is also, there are multiple publics, there are multiplicities of views, there are multiplicity of realities. You know, the whole society is divided into neat little spheres of organized life.
To add to what Vipul has said, I agree entirely with what he said, you know. You've been told, no, good news is no news, bad news is good news. You've been told all the time, you know, I mean, as when you're reading a newspaper,
but you know, newspapers these days have good news pages,
yes,
which is as really, which is...
You ask yourself when you're watching television, listening to a radio broadcast, reading a newspaper, wow, I mean, is something wrong with us? Are we all sadists that, you know, we are first attracted to news about some murder, some rape, a war, a natural calamity. Yeah, that's one part of the story. But to elaborate on what Vipul said, the job of the media managers, the spin doctors, the public relations practitioners, the lobbyists, the so-called sources, is to in fact encourage lazy journalism. Here we are, we're giving you a little handout. We don't want you to ask questions. We don't want you to speak to 5 people. Just speak to me. I'll give you the dope. Not knowing, because you're lazy and you don't want to work hard. So you give information which is biased. That's one part of the story. Having said this, you know, we journalists, we are often sort of full of ourselves. We think no end of ourselves. But it's not very different from many, many other parts of other sections of our society and most societies across the world. You can say, how many honest policemen do you know? Judges are corrupt, lawyers are liars. You know, doctors who we put complete faith in, they indulge in malpractices, or so do politicians, and so do engineers. The point is, within each profession, within each community, you have people who are sincere, who are honest, who are diligent. So it's a choice that you make as young professionals, you know, which side your bread is buttered, or you want some extra cheese or marmalade on that bread, because it's very simple. At the end of the day, it's because, I mean, I'll exaggerate to make the point, it's because there's one judge out of 100 judge who refuses to be bribed that you have a criminal justice system. It is because that 1 out of 100 cops who refuses to accept a bribe from you that you have law and order, and therefore because you have 1 out of 100 journalists, and no, I hope there are many more. There are, I mean,
3 out of 100
there
journalists.
are 15 out of 100 and 20 out of 100 journalists who are honest, who are sincere. That will what will strengthen, you know, our society. And as the so-called fourth estate, you will be in a position to not only ensure there's greater transparency in public life, because that's possibly the best way of curbing corruption and abuse of discretionary powers, because that, after all, is an important role that journalism has to play. And not only that, you try and bridge the gap between those who know and those who don't. You know, so this is really all I.
No.
How many of you have filed an RTI application? Right to information. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. So please file. I mean, it's a great way of plugging into the system and trying to find out how things happen. Just find out something that makes sense to you, and file an RTI application and see. And if you don't get the right reply, go to the appellate authority. It doesn't take anything. You just write. The appellate name is also given at the bottom or at the website. When you get the reply, and they say that we cannot give you this whole reply for X, Y, and Z reasons, and then at the bottom they say for appeal you can go to such and such. So just file a simple paper and say that this is the appellate, and you will find all kinds of very interesting things are happening. I mean, just give you one example. I have not heard a simpler RTI application in my life. There was an uneducated woman in a village in Rajasthan. She asked a question, कृपया मेरे गांव में अध्यापक का नाम बताया जाए. Please tell me the name of the teacher in my village. And the next day, somebody came from the BDO office and said that who are the people who are inciting you? How can you ask this kind of question?
Wonderful.
And
yeah,
she said, Maharaj, you know, she said, I had just asked a very simple question. So, and then a lot of people descended on that village and they started asking questions. It turned out later that the school teacher, there was one teacher who used to come on 15th of August and 26th of January, Jhanda Pherane ke liye, and he used to get 20,000 rupees per month salary, and he had hired somebody for 6,000 rupees to come every day and teach. Okay, so she was confused whether the teacher who comes every day is the real teacher or the one who comes on 26th January is the teacher. So she had asked the question, and they thought that she's subverting the system. That guy was connected to the minister. He was minister's nephew or whatever.
Yeah.
So you know, file an RTI application, and if possible, if your teachers take you, if there is a social audit going on under NREGA or anything in the village, please go and attend a social audit, and your journalism will flower even more.
That's a wonderful note on which to end this former thing, because the power of a question and the power of a simple question. So I think that's really at the heart of some very complicated and complex things you'll probably be assigned as journalists. So any questions for anybody? Yes.
He asked you a question. What are your views on blogging?
On what? On blogging?
No, on everything.
On everything?
Yeah, you should
That
comment
has
on
been
what
said.
we've said.
No, I think at the risk of having the whole room leave. So, no, I mean, my views are pretty implicit in the questions I asked, but I'm a fan of the media. So I've had a lot of defending to do of a lot of kind of TV anchors and all that. And one basic question I ask people who come up with this very aggressive thing about, what about media, etc., is why are you watching what you don't like? So in other ways, you don't buy the soap you don't like because they can find that sort of consumerist parallel easy to understand. Then why on earth are they patronizing cinema, movies, theatre or news that they don't like? To which they all begin to look very sheepish because they usually go after all the big fish in media, which are clearly the big fish because they're also the most circulated, most bought. So I said, that's a question that Indian society has to confront, which Paranjoy pointed out too, that there are as many bad eggs in the media as there are, bad politicians, bad judges, bad lawyers. So I think as democracy and as India is, this is what we've had. This is as good as what we had, which does not mean that it's as good as it would get. And our job is to constantly work on it and look for ways in which to strengthen this and push it along. So while I do recognize that media has all these problems and more, I think our job in it is to also recognize its tremendous power, which is why it exercises people to understand fully the importance of information and what it can do, and to use that for a good cause and do it through asking questions and speaking up, which is what we try and do in all forums.